Question number 24. It reads, Juliet is dash than any of her 7 sisters. Option A, smart. Option B, smarter. Option C, the smartest. And option D, the most smartest. If you look at this question, you will find out that it is from the topic categories. Categories of adjectives. This question is from the topic categories of adjectives. In English, there are 3 categories of adjectives. There are 3 categories of adjectives in English, and they are 1. Positive adjectives, 2. Comparative adjectives, and 3. Superlative adjectives. These are the 3 categories of adjectives we have in English. If I say positive adjectives, comparative adjectives, and superlative adjectives, I mean, for example, if I put here big, here should be bigger, and here should be biggest. In other words, big is a positive adjective. The comparative form is bigger, and the superlative form is biggest. Another example, if I put here beautiful, beautiful, here should be more beautiful, more beautiful, and here should be most beautiful, most beautiful. In other words, beautiful is a positive adjective. The comparative form is more beautiful, and the superlative form is most beautiful. This is what I mean by categories of adjectives. That is, positive adjectives, comparative adjectives, and superlative adjectives. Please note that questions on categories of adjectives usually demand that we choose between comparative and superlative adjectives. Whenever you are faced with a question under categories of adjectives, the question will usually want you to choose between comparative and superlative adjectives. Every question on categories of adjectives usually wants us to choose between comparative and superlative adjectives. How should we answer such a question correctly? Let me help you at this point. Whenever a question wants you to choose between comparative and superlative adjectives, all you need to do is check the number of persons or things compared in the question. Check the number of persons or things compared in the question. It is the number of persons or things compared in the question that determines whether you are to choose a comparative adjective or a superlative adjective. I did not say the number of persons or things written in the question. I said the number of persons or things compared in the question. If the number of persons or things compared in the question is exactly 2, then you are to choose a comparative adjective. A comparative adjective. But if the number of persons or things compared in the question is more than 2, then you are to choose a superlative adjective. I believe that is understood. Just check the number of persons or things compared in the question. If the number compared is exactly 2, then choose a comparative adjective. But if the number compared is more than 2, then choose a superlative adjective. I know that the question you want to ask me now is the gargantuan. How are we going to know that the number of persons or things compared in the question is 2 or more than 2? Let me help you. There will be something in the question. It can be a phrase, it can be a word. There will be something in the question, either a phrase or a word, that will give you a clue as to the number compared. There will always be something in the question. It can be a phrase, it can be a word, that will give you a clue as to the number compared. If the number compared is exactly 2, choose a comparative adjective. But if the number compared in the question is more than 2, that is 3, 4, 5, etc., then choose a superlative adjective. Let us apply everything we have talked about to this question with a view to answering it correctly. If you look at this question, you will find out that it contains the phrase than any of our 7 sisters. In case you don't know, the phrase than any of our 7 sisters is the same as than any one of our 7 sisters. Let me say it again. The phrase than any of our 7 sisters is the same as than any one of our 7 sisters. Insofar the question contains the phrase than any of our 7 sisters, it means that the number of persons compared in this question is 2. And look at them. Juliet, which is 1, and any of our 7 sisters, which is the same as any one of our 7 sisters. Any one of our 7 sisters. So, Juliet compared with any one of our 7 sisters. So, 2 persons are compared here. 2 persons are compared here. The number of persons compared in this question is 2. Juliet compared with any of our 7 sisters, which is the same as any one of our 7 sisters. And we have said that if the number of persons or things compared in the question is exactly 2, then choose comparative adjective. Insofar 2 persons are compared in this question, Juliet compared with any of our 7 sisters, that is any one of our 7 sisters, then we are to choose a comparative adjective. And the comparative form of smart is smarter. The comparative form of smart is smarter. So any option that carries smarter becomes the correct option. So if you look at the options, you will find out that the correct option is option B, smarter. So that the question reads, Juliet is smarter than any of her 7 sisters. I believe that is understood. I know you guys will be thinking that the number of persons compared here is 8, that is Juliet plus her 7 sisters, but that is not true. The number of persons compared in this question is 2. Juliet compared with any of her 7 sisters, that is Juliet compared with any one. Look at it, Juliet compared with any one of her 7 sisters. So how many compared? 2. So we should be using a comparative adjective, in this case smarter. And that is why option B is the correct option for this question. I believe that is understood. Let us look at 1 or 2 other questions so that you will understand better. From what we have learned in question number 24, it means that if we are faced with such a question, this is the dash book I have ever read. Option A, interesting. Option B, more interesting. Option C, much interesting. and option D, most interesting. If you look at the question, you will find out that it contains the phrase, I have ever read. In case you don't know, I have ever read means that you are comparing all the books you have read so far, including this one. And positively speaking, they are far more than 2. Insofar the question contains the phrase, I have ever read, it means that the number of books compared in the question is more than 2. Because I have ever read means that you are comparing all the books you have read so far. And if you are positive in nature, then they are more than 2. So, because of I have ever read, the number of books compared in this question is more than 2. And we have said that if the number of persons or things compared is more than 2, we have to use a superlative adjective. A superlative adjective. And you will agree with me that the superlative form of interesting is most interesting. Most interesting. So any option that carries most interesting becomes the correct option. If you look at the options, you will find out that the correct option is option D, most interesting. So that the question reads, this is the most interesting book I have ever read. I believe that is understood. Please note that comparative adjectives cannot be preceded by more. You cannot precede a comparative adjective by more. The reason is that more is comparative in nature. Using it with a comparative adjective results in what I call a tautology. It is tautological. So, comparative adjectives cannot be preceded by more. I know you still don't understand. Let me break it down. If you say, for example, this is a comparative adjective, you cannot precede the comparative adjective by more. That is, you cannot use more and the comparative adjective. More cannot be used with a comparative adjective. The reason is that more is comparative in nature. Using it with a comparative adjective results in what I call a tautology. It is tautological. To be on the safe side, so that you don't get confused, first of all, write out the comparative adjective. After writing out the comparative adjective, then note that you cannot precede it by more. That is, you cannot use more and the written comparative adjective. I believe that is understood. What then should you do? Because I just said you cannot precede a comparative adjective by more. You cannot use more and a comparative adjective. What then should you do? Let me help you. It is either you use a comparative adjective alone in a sentence. It is either you are using it alone in a sentence. It is either you are using it the way it is, only the comparative adjective in a sentence, or you precede it by much or a lot. If you must precede a comparative adjective by something, it shouldn't be more. Rather, it should be much or a lot. Much or a lot. So, it is either you are using a comparative adjective alone, the way it is in a sentence, only the comparative adjective in a sentence, or if you must precede it by anything, it has to be much or a lot and not more. I believe that is understood. Let us apply everything we just talked about to these two questions with a view to answering them correctly. The first question, it reads, your bag is dash than my bag. Option A, more bigger. Option B, big. Option C, much bigger. And option D, much more bigger. If you look at this question, you will find out that two bags are compared. Two bags are compared. And they are your bag compared with my bag. Two bags are compared here in terms of size. Your bag compared with my bag in terms of size. And we have said that if the number of persons or things compared in the question is exactly 2, then we should be using a comparative adjective. Insofar the number of bags compared here is 2, then we should be using a comparative adjective. It means that option B is wrong. The correct option lies among A, C, and D. Because if you look at option A, there is a comparative adjective. If you look at option C, there is a comparative adjective. And if you look at option D, there is a comparative adjective. So the correct option lies among A, C, and D. The comparative adjective of big is bigger. Let us bring it out. Let us write it out. This is the comparative form of the adjective big. The comparative form of the adjective big is bigger. So we have written it out. Now, we said that to this written comparative adjective, we cannot add more. That is, we cannot precede this written comparative adjective by more. So there is nothing as more bigger. That was why I said, to be on the safe side, first of all, write out the comparative adjective before thinking of preceding and not preceding. So we cannot precede this comparative adjective by more. So there is nothing as more bigger. It is either we are using this comparative adjective the way it is. That is, your bag is bigger than my bag. Or if we must precede it by anything, it has to be much or a lot. So that we can say your bag is bigger than my bag using the comparative alone in the sentence, or your bag is much bigger than my bag, preceding it by much, or your bag is a lot bigger than my bag, preceding it by a lot. So if you look at the options, you will find out that the correct option is option C. So that the question reads, your bag is much bigger than my bag. I know some of you will want to choose option D. Option D is wrong because if you remove the much, you are preceding it by. What you will have left is more bigger. And more bigger is not the comparative of big. The comparative of big is bigger, not more bigger. So what is the more doing here? That is why option D is wrong. The correct option is option C. I believe that is understood. The second question, it reads, Joy is dash than Nkechi. Option A, much more intelligent. Option B, much intelligent. Option C, intelligent. And option D, the most intelligent. If you look at this question, you will find out that two persons are compared. And the two persons are Joy and Nkechi. They are compared in terms of intelligence. In other words, the number of persons compared in this question is 2. And we have said that if the number compared in the question is exactly 2, then we are going to be using a comparative adjective. Insofar the number of persons compared here in terms of intelligence is exactly 2, then we should be using a comparative adjective. A comparative adjective. Now, to be on the safe side, first of all, write out the comparative adjective. You will agree with me that the comparative form of the adjective intelligent is more intelligent. more intelligent. More intelligent. Now, this is the comparative form of the adjective intelligent. It is more intelligent. So more intelligent is a comparative adjective. We have written it out. To this written comparative adjective, we cannot attach more. That is, we cannot precede this comparative adjective by more. So there is nothing as more intelligent. It is either we are using this comparative adjective the way it is in a sentence, that is, Joy is more intelligent than Nkechi, or if we must precede it by anything, it has to be much or a lot, so that we can say Joy is more intelligent than Nkechi, that is using the comparative adjective alone in the sentence. Or we can say Joy is much more intelligent than Nkechi, that is preceding the comparative by much. Or we can say Joy is a lot more intelligent than Nkechi, that is preceding the comparative adjective by a lot. So if you check the options, you will find out that the only correct option is option A, much more intelligent. So that the question reads, Joy is much more intelligent than Nkechi. I believe this is understood. Let us look at the next question number